think you know that we're on daylight savings time, which gives the preacher the permission to preach an extra hour. Maybe not. That didn't sound like it was very well received. It's no surprise to you that someone like me, who speaks for a living, treasures good preaching, inspiring speeches, soaring rhetoric, whether that rhetoric is spoken or written. I am a big fan of some of the soaring rhetoric of our nation's history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the soaring rhetoric of the Declaration of Independence. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all people are created equal. The Gettysburg Address by Lincoln. And then how about what I think is one of the best speeches of all time, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. We have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. And then I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Oh, I wish I could speak and write like Dr. King. Soaring rhetoric, in my opinion, plays a very essential role in our common life. It often serves to take us to our best and to our highest. It generally, when used in a life-giving way, moves us beyond despair and locates us in the middle of a land called hope. And to be human, to be Christian, is to need and to be driven by hope. It's All Saints' Day. It's a day for soaring rhetoric, for written and spoken words that elevate us, that lead us into hope. Even if sometimes the words, the thoughts seem a bit unrealistic, out of touch with the so-called real world. The prophet Isaiah gives us soaring rhetoric today, unrealistic imagery. The words are spoken to a community that knows the defeat of battle and now has experienced the joy of victory. And to this nation comes these words: on this mountain, the Mount of Zion in Jerusalem, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines, of rich food filled with marrow, of well-aged wine strained clear. If your nation has been victimized by an oppressor, as Israel had been, you realize that one of the struggles you often face is the lack of food, the lack of basic necessities. The people in Gaza now know this. Not only are they experiencing bombing, but many of them also lack food, the basic necessities of life. This vision from Isaiah is that those who have been oppressed now are sitting at a banquet table often reserved for the rich. They are eating the best stuff. And the rhetoric continues, and God will destroy on this mountain the shroud that is cast over all peoples, the sheet that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever, and then the Lord God will wipe away all tears from all faces. Oh my gosh. The rhetoric is higher than high, beyond comprehension. Those who knew the devastation of battle, who were well acquainted with the loss of life in war, are now told that death, something known by all peoples and all nations, is a thing of the past. It no longer has power. The mourning that it causes is done away with. No more crying there. No more dying there. No more disgrace that sickness and death and failure cause. The Lord has spoken, and life is fully transformed. And I feel lifted. I feel empowered. Death isn't final. It doesn't speak the last word. I sense an increasing amount of courage coming to my soul and to our corporate life. Now, the soaring rhetoric today doesn't stop with the poetry of Isaiah. It goes on to the poetry of the book of Revelation. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first earth and first heaven had passed away, and the sea was no more. Oh, it's not that the creation was bad, that somehow we need to escape this place. No, not at all. It's that this place hasn't reached its fulfillment. There's too much wrong, too much oppression, too much death. The earth here is a renewed earth. The earth as it ought to be. The sea is no more, which is a way of saying that chaos is gone, and that Roman oppression, which was driven by their control of the waterways, is now a thing of the past. And then I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the home of God is among mortals. God will dwell with them, and they will be God's people." Now, isn't it interesting that many Christians, when they think about the future, conjure up ideas about escaping this life? They call it the rapture, a word that for the most part doesn't show up in the Bible. The view is that we who are the specially chosen or have raised our hands at some crusade get the heck out of here. We get to fly up to heaven where we will be beyond all the ruckus, all the chaos down here on earth. But this is not the vision of the book of Revelation. The vision of this book is that the final future is a matter of God making the earth his home. The future is not an escape plan. No, it is a matter of God tenting among us, moving into our campground. Oh, this is soaring rhetoric that takes our eyes off of heaven and causes us to focus on earth, a transformed earth, where again, death is no more, and mourning and crying and pain are no more. Life and the earth have become what they ought to be and were created to be. And again, I'm empowered. I'm energized. The rhetoric has raised me and us above the so-called facts on the ground. Death, while real and powerful, is not controlling life. Bigger than death is a God who has the ability to recreate, whose primary job is not death, but life. Jesus makes that very clear in our gospel reading for today. You know, he's been beckoned to respond to the needs of his friends Mary and Martha, who have lost to death their brother Lazarus. Jesus meets Mary and Martha outside of town, eventually arriving at Lazarus' grave. Now, in this visit, I hope you note this, that Jesus didn't skim over the reality of death. He feels it. He even gets mad. That's what the text tells us. He's mad at death. And he begins to weep. But the stench of death doesn't stop him. He goes over to the tomb and with a loud voice cries out, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man came out. For you see, in God, what rules is not death, but resurrection. Unbind him and let him go. In Jesus, there is freedom from the power of death. Oh, think what that means. Think about how much control death has over our lives. Think about the anger it produces, the bitterness that it creates, the hopelessness that it engenders, the despair that it causes, and yes, even the crabbiness that it leads to. The lives of many people are run by death. But today, death has been met head on by something bigger than death. Today, in the midst of death, has appeared life. Life that invites you to come out of the tombs. And sometimes you're even your self-imposed tombs. Life that unbinds your clothes. The clothes of death. And sets you free. Now, I don't say this with any flippancy. You know, I had a birthday yesterday, and I was reminded I'm getting older, and I don't like that at all, and I would do whatever I can to keep myself younger. But, you know, why is it? Because I don't want to face that reality that growing older means. So I don't say any of this with any flippancy, with a sense that dealing with death is easy. You all know better. We all know better. It's the hardest thing we do in life. Grief is very real, and its pain sometimes can last a lifetime. But the Christian message experienced in the resuscitation of Lazarus, and most fully in the resurrection of Jesus, is that in the end, life wins. The soaring rhetoric of the Scriptures is intended to call us to trust that, even when at times it feels nearly impossible to do so. The soaring rhetoric of the Scriptures is meant to give us hope, and not just for after we die, although we're called to trust it for that as well. No, Isaiah and Revelation imagine a whole new future so that you and I might live differently right now, so that we might have a different imagination of what is possible now. We who trust the soaring rhetoric of hope will live hopefully now. We'll make sure that the poor are fed, that housing is provided for all who need it, that strangers are welcomed, that war is brought to an end, that life is not controlled by our petty violence, that this fragile earth is cared for, that sinners are forgiven, that enemies are loved, that the left out are let in, and that death is not allowed to speak the final word in our lives. The soaring rhetoric of Isaiah and Revelation is meant to quote King, to remind ourselves of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time for us to imagine hope and live it. Death is amazingly powerful. But you and I know something more powerful than death. In the end, God. And God is a God of life.